Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca Kelly from Flat Living Magazine and I'm joined today by Niall Raster from BlockMan. Thanks for joining me, Niall.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rebecca.
So we're going to have a look at BlockMan block management software, and before we get started, I just wondered if you could let us know who you are and what you do at BlockMan, please.
The company's name is Top 4 Systems Limited, and BlockMan is a web-based application for managing apartment block service charge administration, ground rent administration, so on and so forth. We develop it in-house ourselves. We write, develop, maintain, and support it. It's supported. It's maintained on Amazon Web Services in London, based in London. We've been doing this probably about 20 years. It started out originally as a kind of like a DOS command line based system. We developed it originally very strongly from an accounting point of view. So from the very start, BlockMan enabled every block that you manage to have a balance sheet, a trial balance, and a profit and loss. We did all of that accountancy stuff first. I think that's important because many people will start with kind of diary functions and front office functions, and they'll work backwards. And the hardest part of it all is actually the accountancy side of things. So we used to install this locally on a server, and we used to move this to people's offices, and we found the limitations on that quite quickly. So very early then we also started developing it into the web application, and of course it's gone through much development since, and that's the product that you see today. So we were one of the very early adapters of that web application, and of course it makes it very easy for us to deploy, maintain, support, etc.
Perfect, that sounds great. And the software itself, is it for self-managed blocks as well as managing agent, or is it purely aimed for managing agents to manage multiple blocks?
It was developed and designed really for the agent to manage multiple blocks. So, for example, there's portfolio-wide functions. If a block was to adopt this for themselves, there's quite a lot of functionality there they wouldn't use. But that said, we do have some very large developments that have decided to take a BlockMan license for themselves. And so we would have a block of nearly 900 units, for example. We have some other developments where the directors are very involved. They might be 150 units or 200 units. So we have quite a lot of instances where they've taken a BlockMan installation themselves. And that, of course, means that they can give access to a managing agent. So they're not entirely self-managed, but they actually do have their own BlockMan. Hi, and welcome to BlockMan. BlockMan, as I said, is a web-based application. Every block has its own installation or its own database. It's not a shared database in that sense. There are two menu systems. There's a menu system at the top here, the portfolio system. Here you'll select block. You'll have a select block screen, for example. There is another menu system when we select a block. This menu system here, this belongs to the block itself. This is all, of course, test data. I've called this the sand hill, as in a sandbox for test purposes. But back at the portfolio menu, under settings, for example, you'll create your own users. These users will either be property managers or financial people or bookkeepers and so on. Your own access levels, etc. We don't license software based on the number of the users. We license it based on the number of units. We have, for the bookkeepers, a default set of general ledger accounts. The 5,000 range are the expense accounts that you're going to see in every block. Every block will have its own set of accounts. You can customize the categories for the expenses as well as the individual items under each category you can customize as well. The 4,000 range is the range of income you're going to collect for each block. So typically service charges, insurance, or something like that. In certain blocks, you will have more than one income account, of course, if there's more than one budget. So you may have a state budget and a block A budget, and of course you can customize this list of income accounts as well. The 3,000 accounts are capital accounts. These capital accounts are going to link income and expenditure, enable you to report on income and expenditure on a per budget basis, which is a major strength of the software. And then, of course, you have asset and liability accounts. So those expense accounts, there's a default set. Every time you create a new block, you can either select from the default set, or you can select a set of accounts from one of these pre-established blocks. Other things that concern settings are your agency details, bank details for service charge accounts, bank details for ground rent accounts. We also have suppliers which are added at a portfolio level. Suppliers might be common to all blocks or not, as the case might be. When I have added a supplier, I'm typically going to add bank details. I'm going to add documents. These documents, for example, could concern their insurance. And what I'm hoping to do is upload a document that concerns their insurance, put in an expiry date, and then the system will alert me, of course, when that is going to expire. So we have outstanding invoices and open works orders. These are all at a portfolio level. And then they exist at a block level then when we add the supplier to a particular block. So there's a lot of functionality at a portfolio level. When we select the block, we have a series of menus as well. On the landing page here, we just see some documents that are handy to be accessed at this point. However, under the block manager menu, we have the main administration area for the block. There's handy information like block information. You can customize the categories and add any detail that you wish. This is for your own internal view. There's a document section. This is for reports, and it would be for scheduled maintenance, reoccurring items. It could be for anything really. If I was to select a new item, I could suggest an insurance policy. I want to link that to a broker. I upload the policy document, and I indicate whether I want to share with the leaseholders on Myblockman. Myblockman is the portal for leaseholders. There's a date associated with every single document, of course, and then a trigger, a reminder trigger, which will tell me whether I want this document, if I want to be reminded that this document is going to expire in a year's time, I want to be notified in advance of that. So the block documents area is the main document storage area for every single block. Some documents I'm sharing with the leaseholders on Myblockman, and you can see this little Myblockman logo, which indicates that. Some documents are expiring, and I want to be reminded of that, and that's a trigger item. Some are just circulars, for example, and those circulars I don't need to be reminded of, or maybe I haven't shared with the leaseholders online. So in the administration area for the block, we've block manager, block information, block documents. There's health and safety items that could spill out of some of these reports, and it allows you to track these health and safety items at this level. We do have a main issues and works area though up here, so this would be specifically for health and safety. There is an area in secretarial that's becoming more and more important for apartment blocks, townhouse developments, and leasehold property. Management companies are created, of course, by either the lease or the freeholder, or sometimes by the leaseholders through a right to manage scenario. We have a situation here where in every block you can establish company office details, so whether it's limited by guarantee or share capital. You can indicate that there's a board of directors or council of management. There's incorporation dates and company registration number, etc. We store details for company office records, so confirmation statement, date. You can have an email account, of course, with Companies House that can file this information online, so we store passwords and authentication codes, etc. Even if there's no management company, there's some secretarial information that's required for the service charge demand concerning section 4748, and that's customizable. We include notice 153 with every service charge demand, and there's a Welsh translation for those blocks that are in Wales. So there's a lot going on in the secretarial area. We also store secretary details, and we store directors' details. You can produce then, of course, using this information, you can produce AGM notices. There's a suggested agenda. You can include with that AGM notice proxy forms and nomination forms. There's also directors' meetings that you can conduct, or resident committee meetings, and so on and so forth. Those notices that go out, eventually you will have minutes. Those minutes can be stored against those notices. And of course, similar to many things that happen in BlockMan, anytime you generate those AGM notices, an email notification will go to the leaseholders. You can generate membership certificates and share certificates, and you can maintain a share register. All of this information, of course, is stored online and accessible from anywhere. And the reports that you generate from this, you can share with the directors of the management company and so on. So block manager, information, documents, health and safety, secretarial, certain professionals, you can list here health and safety officers or solicitors or anything like that. We then get onto the financial information. At a portfolio level, you would have had a default set of general ledger accounts. At a block level, I have customized this list. I've probably removed things like lift that I don't need. Perhaps there's no lift. I've added things, perhaps there's cleaning in block A and cleaning in block B. I've created separate income accounts for the estate service charge in block A and block B service charges. We guide you through this. Each item is linked. Estate service charge income, for example, is linked to expense items, which are linked to these capital items, which allow us to generate income and expenditure reports on a per budget or per lease schedule basis. So once you've customized this set of accounts, it's really only the budget figures which are indicated, or the budget accounts which are indicated by these pound signs. It's really only the budget that's changed every year, because the list is pretty static of the customized accounts that you do. So those general ledger accounts and budgets, particular to each block, customized to each block, we assist you on that as well. When it comes to charging that budget out, you need lease schedules, and the lease schedule is, of course, defined by the lease document. If I select new schedule, it'll probably describe it best what's required. There's a service charge name, for example. The frequency is either yearly, half-yearly, or quarterly. As per the financial year of the block, I should add, these quarter rent days, half-yearly rent days, these correspond with, of course, these gale dates, the 25th of March, 24th of June, 29th of September. So your frequency is either based on the financial year or based on the rent days. And then the charge method for each lease schedule is either equal or it's percentage. When you import the unit information for the first time, the leaseholder information for the first time, you can do so in a CSV file. And if they are percentage-based contributions that they make towards these lease schedules or budgets, then you can include in that CSV file the percentage amount that they contribute towards each lease schedule. We have an agency service file for each block, which allows you to describe your fees, or maybe a company secretarial service, or the standard regular fees that you charge a block. These can be applied at a global level, at a portfolio level, based on the information you supply here. And so that you don't have to go into each block and raise your fees and so on and so forth. Banking, each block has its own can potentially have its own service charge account. You can operate in the other system where you have a global account for all the blocks. But each block can have its own bank account. It can have multiple reserve fund accounts or deposit accounts as well. And that's all in the setup under Block Manager. When you've imported the unit information into the block, it's arranged in a list as this. I can see information about the leaseholders at a glance, if some are with solicitor or some are on standing order, some are a house or a flat. I can see contact information. I can see whether they're resident or non-resident. I don't have to open a leaseholder account online for every unit. In this example, I have one unit out of the 11 that actually have an online leaseholder account. I can see the service charge due and the ground rent due, and they're charged separately, as you can guess. If I go into any particular unit's details, the information is arranged in a series of tabs across the screen. I can see what they contribute towards in terms of lease schedules. In this case, this leaseholder pays towards an estate service charge and a Block A service charge, but they're not contributing towards a Block B service charge. There's emergency contact information. The emergency contact information, you can export this in a GDPR report if you wish. However, once they have an account online on Myblockman, which might be a good time to bring you into Myblockman, they will see the same information concerning their unit details. So, in fact, if you get a GDPR request, you can always refer them to their leaseholder account online, and that should satisfy the requirements that you'll see on Blockman. Staying on Myblockman for a moment, there were documents that you saw on Blockman. You can choose to share those, of course, with the leaseholders. I'll come back to that in a little while. Every unit, of course, has a preferred payment method. Some by default will just pay online using using their banking online application. They could, in fact, pay by standing order. You can register the details, the amount that they're paying, the reference, and the particular day. This can assist in transactions at a later stage. Interested parties could include a bank. There's notes, of course. Free form entry for notes on any particular unit. There's documents on the unit. This could be letters or emails or things that particular importance to this particular unit. And we also keep a history of the leaseholders, previous leaseholders on this property. There's a history of issues that they've raised. These are repairs and maintenance. These are housekeeping. These are house rules, perhaps. We'll come back to issues and works in a little while. Then we have two ledger accounts, one for service charges and one for ground rent. They must be kept separately because, of course, you're raising service charge demands separate to a ground rent demand. So in this particular case, this unit owes £2,641 in terms of service charge, and then it owes £500 in terms of ground rent. Every service charge demand that you've ever raised, of course, is available here, and also in terms of the ground rent. The service charge demand, the structure is rigid, but the content isn't. So you can call it request for payment, you can call it application for payment, you can call it service charge demand, you can call it whatever you want. It's divided into three sections. The top third has information about the leaseholder and where they exist. The second third is information on the transactions and Landlord and Tenant Act 87, Section 47, 48, other information, payment details. You can advise that they pay by bank transfer, or that you can include details for a credit card or debit card facility. You can include by post and checks if you want, or you can suppress that. So you can have a minimum of one on the payment details, or 3 or 4. And then, of course, it's the rights and obligations that are included as well. An interesting thing to note is when you're raising demands in advance of the end of the financial year for the next financial year, we do what's called a demand notice in advance. So the person will see this raised perhaps in November or in the prior year. They'll see this demand raised. It doesn't change the balance on their account until the new year, and it's a little bit of an accounting conundrum that's particular to service charges. So if this person was to pay both what they owe this financial year and perhaps the advance demand, they would actually end up in credit until the new financial year when they're actually charged, or it's applied for real. So that advance demand is technically pending until the new financial year when it's actually applied for real. That we call that advance notice. It's different from the request for payment. The ground rent demand, it's the Section 166 notice, as you'd expect to see. It's quite intimidating, I suppose, in some respects. It looks quite formal, and there's not a lot of information as to how they should pay. So we include with the Section 166 a more human, readable, friendly service ground rent demand as well, where you can include bank details and so on and so forth. Again, on Myblockman, every account will have a service charge account view and a ground rent account view. So they'll receive email notifications every time you charge them. Every time they've paid a service charge demand, they'll receive an email notification. They will be able to go online and download these documents at any stage. So you need to consider your customer service policy as well. Do you want to be in a position where you're responding on demand all the time in the manner that the leaseholder demands, and copying statements and copying email notifications? There's issues there associated with attaching anything to an email and sending it out. A lot of people are working remotely now. I do believe that the online account is the way to go from a customer service policy, from a security policy, from a GDPR policy. You're encouraging the person to log in and download these documents themselves from a secure location online. So service charge history and, as I say, ground rent history are kept separately. These transactions are all applied really through a transactions menu here. I'll be asked to do transactions charges, either all units and service charge or ground rent. I can apply single unit charges, which could be, for example, debt collection fees or administration fees and so on and so forth. I can apply as well general ledger transactions. So this could be, for example, bank interest and so on and so forth. And I can add invoices from suppliers. So an invoice comes in from a supplier. I can add this manually, or I can import this information in a CSV file. I can split the invoice between budget items. So if the invoice, say, is for £1,500, I can split that between a block B cost, for example, and a block A cost, or something like that. As long as the total, of course, adds up to as long as the two items add up to the total. I can upload an image of that invoice as well, so I can export all those invoice images at the end of the year for the bookkeeper. So those are adding invoices. I can pay invoices from the system only if the block is in funds, of course. I can pay an invoice. I can do so manually, but we also have what we call the creditor payment system, where if all of these bank accounts have a separate bank account, you can create a central account from which to pull money from these bank accounts and then push money to the suppliers, and they all receive email notifications. That's a little bit more advanced accounting. It's quite simple to set up. It's difficult to understand until you've done it for the first time. But essentially what you're doing is a payment run every month using BACS files. Okay, so then we have a bank reconciliation. A bank reconciliation, it's modeled on the preferred methodology for ARMA or for Property Mark or for the RICS, where you're including a bank statement balance, which hopefully is going to reconcile, or if there's a difference, basically, you need to pursue that. It's done using bank dates and transaction dates, and the reason for that is if you are a member of one of those organizations, and there is regulations probably coming down the line which might actually require everybody to be in this scenario. At a global level, one of our global reports here is to allow you to produce a report for any bank date to show that you are balanced and reconciled at any date for all of the blocks in the portfolio. It's a very handy report to show any visiting inspector or auditor or anybody that perhaps wants to look at the accounts and confirm that you're always balanced and reconciled with these clients' funds. So here I can see, for example, that one particular block, according to BlockMan, had 7341 in that particular random date, 9th of February. But according to the bank statement, it would be 7,500. And that's, of course, down to an unreconciled credit. So bank reconciliation is part of our transactions. The reports that we generate are based around the standard traditional balance sheet and the standard traditional profit and loss account, which of course we call income and expenditure. Your income and expenditure account, your income of course goes up every time you charge a service charge, and your expenditure goes up every time you add a bill. There's a surplus or there's a deficit, which we calculate automatically in the system. I'm running a surplus, I'm glad to see, on the estate and on block A and block B. Last year, not so good. I ran a deficit in two areas, on the estate and block B, which I can recover just from those leaseholders if I want to. This profit and loss account, of course, this surplus, of course, it translates into the balance sheet. The balance sheet is all about the cash, how much cash you've got in the bank, how much debtors, and then what you have on reserve. And then the liabilities, of course, you owe suppliers money. You might have some unidentified lodgements or some prepaid service charges, but that's your net assets and liabilities. Those net assets and liabilities equal the surplus you carry forward from last year, or the deficit as the case might be, and the current transfers, the current surplus as we call it. So those figures should balance. That's what basically a balance sheet does. And the question could arise, of course, that if your income and expenditure account is suggesting a surplus on this area, the directors may wish to see that surplus physically manifest itself in a bank account. It could only do so, of course, if there's no debtors. A big question arising out of these reports is who owes this money and what are you doing to collect it? Our overdue units are listed here in a table format. We can see by pie chart who how the mix is going, if you like. So if we have a situation where there's 3 debtors, for example, or overdue units that exist across that, and it's also represented in a pie chart, and then it could say any others and things like that. So the top 3, for example, I can look at. There's a standard output format or calendar aged for overdue units. I can see lots of things, including comments, payment comments. I can see contact details. I can see the last time we raised the demand and the last time they paid anything. If they're on standing order, I can see how much is to clear before the end of this charge period. And then I can change, of course, the output to calendar aged or financial year aged. Calendar aged, of course, just follows the number of months. Financial year aged is a report based on the start of their financial year. I can apply a quick view for any of these changes to see the report, or I can produce the report, which is basically going to give me a PDF and a CSV file. Other important reports following on from the balance sheet and the income and expenditure report. There's the debtors, as I've just shown you. There's a trial balance. There's a budget analysis. It's like a variance report. So if, for example, I'm overspending in a particular area, it'll predict towards the end of the year, based on that pattern of overspend, how I could possibly finish up by the end of the year. So red obviously is bad. If I have a budget of £400 on repairs here, I've already spent to date 1,050. I could be 500% over by the end of the year if I carry through till the end of the year. We've also forecast analysis reports, which allows me to predict by the end of the year how much I'm going to spend. I have a bank account report, general ledger account history. So, for example, where they may ask you how we're spending so much money on that repairs and maintenance, I can see how much we're spending. I can see the original invoices, and I can see where all that expenditure is landing. So we've a lot going on there at a block level. In addition to raising service charge demands, you can produce direct debit mandates, standing order mandates, emergency contact forms. You can do interest calculations on arrears. You can produce reminders and final notices and with solicitors. When you're doing things like reminders, of course, it'll skip those units that are on hold or perhaps are on standing order. Your reminder is going to allow you to select all the units that are in arrears, or perhaps you can just do it for one if you wish. You can include the Section 153 notice again with the reminder. You can include units marked with solicitor if that's your want. It's not probably a good idea. Minimum amount overdue, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of interactivity with the reminders and final notices. Back to a global level, a portfolio level, you can import receipts of service charges. These receipts of service charges can be in a CSV form from the bank, as you download from the bank. You can import ground rent receipts and so on and so forth. You can do bulk standing orders and service charges. We can import invoices from creditors. We can use the creditor payment system to pay creditors. I just mentioned that earlier on. That involves having one bank account through which all the money is pulled from the various block accounts and pushed through. And it's like a bunny hop in terms of two BACS files. And all of the suppliers then receive email notifications. So I can email the suppliers from the screen here with all their payment details across all the blocks and so on and so forth. Our reports at a global level are extensive. We have financial reports at a global level. We've secretarial reports at a global level. We've debtors reports at a global level. We've creditor reports at a global level. We've agency sales at a global level. And the idea is when you're using BlockMan to do your accounts for all of these blocks, that you take a lot of heavy lifting off your office account as well. So you could end up with one debtor account for all your fees on your office account. We then come to issues and works. This is your day-to-day maintenance. I'm quite fortunate that I've only got 2 open issues on this particular block. I can search by block or across the portfolio. If I record an issue, it could be typically a telephone conversation I'm having. They could be calling from this. I could ask them what it's in connection with. If I already have an open issue on that particular item, it'll flag it and say it's a possible duplicate, and then of course I can indicate it's a duplicate. I'll ask them where they're calling from, of course. I'll determine whether they're the leaseholder or not. I can mention the service charge they owe at the same time, and then a brief description of what's going on. I can indicate whether it's a high priority or not, attach a report perhaps or an email, and then I can add that issue. These issues, they can be simply dealt with through a series of actions. So I called somebody to deal with something, and then I'll see a history of these actions, ultimately until they're resolved. Sometimes an issue, though, requires more than a telephone call or a letter or something like that. Sometimes these issues are going to be converted into works, and if that's the case, I convert it to a works order. And the works order, of course, allows me to select the contractor who's issuing it. I'm going to be warned when I'm doing the works order that this supplier hasn't got any insurance details or health and safety file, or perhaps their insurance has expired, and so on and so forth. So in the works order, then I can put in works to be carried out, fix something, and I can also mention the budget item that this is going to be associated with, which people find handy when the invoice comes back. Special terms and condition, not over £500, for example. Deadline date, usual things that you'd expect. You attach a report, for example, to the works order, and those can be emailed from the system here. So we've two lists. We have an issues list, which is basically to-dos. They could be complaints about, I don't know, house rules or something like that. And then they could become part of the second list, which is our works orders list, which is actually instructions to contractors, which are emailed from the system here. So you have two lists really that you're maintaining. There's an issues list and there's a works orders list, and there's reports that come out of that. And these reports will tell you, for example, which blocks, I suppose, are attracting the most issues. They'll tell you things like which categories you're dealing with mostly, whether it's gates or lift or house rules or whatever it is. Your contact methodology and so on and so forth. And these can be reports generated into reports for either internal management purposes, so you can see what your success rate is in dealing with issues, or it can be for external director reports for management companies and blocks to understand how much work you're doing for them. So it's quite convenient for you to say to them, for example, we took 600 calls last year. There was 7 actions associated with every single call. They converted into X number of works orders, and then we've Y number of works orders now that are outstanding. So it's there's a lot concerning the issue analysis and the works orders. Back to Myblockman. Myblockman is the portal for the leaseholders. In here, we're sharing the information you want to share with them. You may not, for example, want to share documents, and that's okay. There's announcements. These are announcements that you will report to them on repairs, the leaseholders on repairs and maintenance issues. I can create an announcement with an image or another document and so on and so forth. The announcements could also be global, so you could send an email and notification to all the leaseholders and all the blocks. You need to be careful with that, of course, about maybe Christmas opening hours or something like that. There's a directors area in Myblockman that you can share reports for just the directors only and not the general leaseholders. There's a meetings area where there will be AGM meetings and directors meetings, notices and things like that. The directors, again, will only see the directors stuff. Some leaseholders might have more than one unit, but if they just have one unit, they're just going to see service charge history, ground rent history for each unit. There's a make a payment page. We can use this if you have a debit card or credit card facility. We can pass the information, the reference number, to the merchant account through Myblockman. There's also advances that we're making here on Myblockman with the new open banking formats that are happening, which will hopefully allow the leaseholder to open their own banking online from here and make a payment themselves from here, taking the information automatically from here. So there's a lot of development that's going on in open banking platforms that we're hoping to incorporate into this in this year 2021. Unit details, emergency contact details, and you can share issues that have arisen. These are issues that the leaseholder has reported. They can see if actions or these issues are proceeding or not. And so there's information going on there. So that's the tour of BlockMan and Myblockman, both web-based applications and based on the traditional balance sheet profit and loss account for BlockMan, and of course the online leaseholder portal is Myblockman. I hope you've enjoyed and learned something from that presentation, and thank you for your time.